This is my book. Get your hero up a tree. What does that even mean? The book is really a book on screenwriting, but it's more about movies and the strange medium that film is, because it's not a writer's medium. It's something we write, but when you look at a screenplay, it has no relationship whatsoever to an end movie that you see in a theater or on your TV screen. It is an entirely different thing. And sure, the actors say the words that you put on the page, and they film the scenes as you've written them, but it becomes a totally different experience than, say, reading something. So what makes it different from a novel or from theater? Theater doesn't have nearly the extended amount of changing of time and sets and things like that we can and do in a film. So it tends to be a very talky medium, with people talking on a stage, where film can be a very visual medium, where we can use the edit and we can use the picture, we can use visuals to tell our story. And of course we can be helped by dialogue and all the things that go with that, and this is something we'll talk about a lot. So get your hero up a tree. Where does the title come from? Well, it comes from the 3-act structure. It was just a saying that is popularized to say, what is the 3-act structure? 3-act structure. The 3-act structure is this. Get your hero in a tree, Act 1. Throw stones at them is Act 2. And then Act 3, get them out of the tree. And I believe there's a Canadian film called Treed Murphy that sort of plays on this. But it is sort of, what's the story? What gets a story started? Well, you throw them in a tree. What keeps the story going? Well, you just keep throwing rocks at them until, you figure out how to get out of the tree. It's flippant, it's silly, but it's also shows you that it's not as complicated as everyone wants to make it out to be. Everyone wants to talk and ad nauseum about these things. Oh, I know structure. They'll say, I'm good at structure. Well, what does that mean? Structure is quite simple. It's like I have to get my hero in the tree and I got to get him out of the tree. It's everything that happens within that is very complicated. And that's the difficulty of the writer. Not the structure, but coming up with the things that are stopping your characters from getting what they want. So this book sort of delves into all that kind of stuff. One of the first chapter I write is called Empathy. It's a very short chapter. If you want to learn about movies are about empathy. That's what they are. Movies are getting the audience to go down on a journey with a character and care for them and care about whether or not they succeed in their journey and go along with them. I was watching a video the other day by Lindsay Ellis about why she thinks Titanic is great. I also do think Titanic is a great film. And she talked, the reason why the film works better than, say, Pearl Harbor is empathy. You empathize with the characters more. And it has something to do with the actors. Of course, it has a casting and all that. It has a lot to do with the writing and the presentation. It also has something to do with something that films have that other mediums don't, which is experience. Because at the end of the film, when the Titanic is sinking, we all knew the Titanic was going to sink, but it's the filmmakers putting you in the point of view of a character who's in that situation, where you see it from the point of view of people, what it's like to be on the deck or under the decks, or what it's like to be on the boat to see this thing in the with its ass in the air, about to sink. And people are falling off, and all the great shots that are like the moments where somebody falls down and they hit the rudder or whatever on the way down, and you feel it. That's one of the great things about Titanic, is that it puts you there. It puts you there, and you empathize, and that's something that the writer can't give you. That is something that the filmmaker gives you. The visuals give you, the timing, the playing of the words on the screen. In the point of view of a character. It's not a staged drama where we're on a stage. We're in the view of the character. We see the boat. We see the iceberg. And she does a great thing where she's talking about, like, every time you watch it, you're getting to the iceberg, and you're starting to turn, and you're starting to turn. Even every time you've seen the movie, you're like, my God, if they're going to make it, are they going to make it? And then, they don't make it. But why you hold that shot for so long? Why do you do that? Well, you do that because you're building that tension And even after you've seen the movie, you know what's going to happen. But there is that little sense in yourself that we're like, oh, if only you could have just avoided it. If only we wouldn't have got the movie. But a lot of people wouldn't have died either. So there's that. So my book, empathy. Talk about empathy is a big thing. And I, go through all the variations of a screenwriting book. But one of the things I think that separates it, and I'll let you read it, the book, that is, when you buy it, make sure you buy it, the description's down below, is talking about the medium, the format of making a film versus a novel. And I do put forward that nobody's ever made a good film based on Edgar Allan Poe. And Poe feels like he should be extremely filmic because everything is dark and cavernous and well described. But his dramas are interior dramas. They're not exterior dramas. So they're very difficult to actually take a Poe drama and then externalize it into the film medium, which is a very different thing. I think the best thing ever done on Edgar Allan Poe, of course, was The Simpsons' The Raven, which is wonderful. But it is, it's a telling of the poem through the voice of Darth Vader, or anyway, the man who plays him. And it's James Earl Jones, I know that. But it is, it just presents it in a funny way, and it's probably, to me, my favorite adaptation. And everyone wants and this will be great for the comments, I suppose. Someone will say, no, but you have to see this version or that version or a Hammer version or something that I haven't seen. And I want to know, because I've never really seen a really great Edgar Allan Poe film, even though it suggests there should be, based on sort of the macabre of his writings, that it should have been a no-brainer. But it's not, because the medium's different. And the novel, and the point of view of the novel and the characters of the novel are different than what it is in a movie. Movies are different things. And you have to invent a lot for Poe in order for, and I use the Cask of Amontillado. Amontillado is as an example of, you have to invent a lot in order to make that into an interesting movie, because there's not a whole lot in the actual text for a filmmaker. There's a lot in the feeling, in the dread in the text for a filmmaker, and in the caverns, and putting the man in his tomb. But as a filmmaker, it becomes very, problematic, very difficult to adapt. So talk about Empire Strikes Back versus Attack of the Clones. So the book deals with all sorts of things, and I use all sorts of examples in here, and a lot of them are popular films that you should know. Apocalypse Now, or Lord of the Rings, or Jaws is a good example for the use of character, creating characters through archetype, which is also something I think Lindsay talked about very well in her video, which I'm going to link to because I'm going heavy on it because I just watched it. But it is you start with an archetype always. But archetypes can be changed through various means. I'll talk about that when I do a video on The Third Man. Because you have an archetype, and then you have the ability to then change your archetype into something more interesting and twist it a little bit. But film is thin that way. You can only have so much time to deal with characters. So there's a thing on archetype in Jaws. The cast has as much to do with it as the writing does. Richard Dreyfuss is a perfect cast.
Wealthy college boys don't have the education enough to admit when you're wrong.
As was Roy Scheider and the mayor and Quint.
Blueberry idiot! Starboard! Ain't you watching it? Blueberry neutral!
The casting's perfect, and it's dead on, and they really inhabit those characters. So yeah, they were on the page, but they live on the screen, which it has to be done with a proper casting, and a great cast is killer. And it's only bad when bad movies are made with great casts, because that should be against the law, actually. So there is structure. I talk a lot about David Mamet and Aristotle a little bit. Aristotle. Mamet talks about Aristotle. And of course, reference back to those books that I love. Talking about Billy Wilder or Orson Welles or anything like that. So if you're interested, get a copy of my book. You can get an audiobook version of it, written by me, read by Eric Cater, or you can get the digital version online, or you can get a print edition like this, like printed book. You can sit at the beach and spend the half hour it's going to take you to read it. Anyway, this is my book, Get Your Hero Up a Tree. Come along the journey on the channel. I'm going to talk a lot about different things, and I'll refer back to it every once in a while. But it's really a jumping off point for this channel, for myself and for my students who I've taught. Where do I start? Where do I go from here? And how do I, not follow the formula? Because I do I like Save the Cat. It was a good book, but it did teach formula, and I use a lot of examples in my book as to where great movies don't follow formula. Lord of the Rings, it's like an hour and a half before the inciting incident really gets going, or It's a Wonderful Life, an hour and 40 minutes in before they lose the money in It's a Wonderful Life, and then the how are we gonna fix all this? Well, it took us an hour and 40 minutes to even start it. So there's exceptions to all the rules, and there are rules as well. So we'll talk about formula. We're talking about breaking a formula, but it's always good to know the formula. And then you can break it ad nauseum, and then you can tell people why you broke it. Anyway, I'll subscribe, and I will see you next time.
You want to let that breathe for nothing.